Hello everyone and welcome again to cafetography.co.uk. Today we'll be looking at one of Canon's best professional macro lenses, the EF 100mm f2.8 IS USM L. Macro lenses can be enormously fun, enabling you to get pictures very close to your subjects and having a maximum aperture wide enough to get lovely out-of-focus backgrounds. And the 100mm focal length of this lens, making it short telephoto, is quite versatile for a lot of photographic uses. Canon's 100mm macro lenses have always impressed photographers with their high picture quality, but this new and modern L lens aims to impress even further with its nicer build quality and image stabilisation. Its image stabilisation is quite a sophisticated system, offering lateral and longitudinal stabilisation, making it much easier to use for handheld photography and video work. Here you can see some footage with the stabilisation turned off, and here it is turned on. As you can see, it's very effective indeed, holding your image very still. However, here's some close-up footage with the stabilisation turned off, and now turned on. As you can see, at closer distances, the stabilisation is less effective. Still, the IS on this lens helps you to get sharp pictures and smooth footage if you're doing video work. This is, potentially, a very flexible and fun lens to use. Firstly, let's look at its build quality. Although the lens is made of plastic, it feels very solid indeed, and it even has weather sealing to help protect it against rain and dust. The lens's main physical feature is a large focus ring, which turns very smoothly and precisely, just perfect for macro photography. As usual for a lens of this class, it has full-time manual focusing, so you can turn that focus ring anytime you want to. The front element neither rotates nor extends as you do so. The lens's autofocus system is reasonably quiet and quite fast, considering the huge focus range it goes through. Overall, the lens is built extremely well to Canon's highest standards, so it's a pleasure to use. Let's look at the all-important image quality though. We'll start by testing it on a full-frame camera, in this case a 20-megapixel Canon 6D. We are turning on peripheral illumination and chromatic aberration correction for this test. At f2.8 in the center of the image, this lens is very sharp indeed, with very good colors and contrast. And it's the same story over in the corners. We see a very sharp image without chromatic aberration. That's a very nice performance. Stop the aperture down to f4 for a further improvement. So we can say that this lens is seriously sharp. It stays sharp until about f16. However, the effects of diffraction begin to kick in around f22 and f32, giving a softer image. But overall, this is an astonishingly sharp lens when used on a full-frame camera, and Canon should give themselves a real pat on the back for their achievement here. Now let's look at the image quality when used on an APS-C camera, in this case the 20-megapixel Canon 70D. At f2.8, the lens is slightly less sharp in the middle of the image, but it's still turning in quite a good performance, with very nice colors and contrast. It's the same situation in the edges of the picture. However, stop the lens down to f4, and the lens becomes very sharp indeed. It remains this sharp until about f11, but stopping down beyond that means that you're dealing with serious diffraction problems. f32 is particularly soft. However, at the end of the day, the Canon 100mm Macro L lens is pretty sharp on APS-C cameras, especially when it's topped down a little. Something very important for a macro lens is its close-up image quality, so let's take a look at that now. At f2.8, you can see the lens's paper-thin depth of field on this feather. The area in focus is quite sharp, and stop the lens down to f4 for some serious sharpness close up. By the time you reach f22, the image quality is starting to get softer again, and at f32 we have a soft image, typical for most lenses at such a narrow aperture. So that's actually quite a normal sharpness characteristic for a macro lens. This particular model is nice, but it's not doing anything particularly unique. Let's move on now and look at distortion and vignetting. They're not a problem on APS-C cameras, so let's look at the performance on full frame. The good news is that this lens shows virtually no distortion whatsoever. Take a look at those lovely straight lines. We are getting some dark corners though, or vignetting, at f2.8. Let's top the lens down a little to f4 for a lot more brightness in those corners. So it's essentially a perfect performance for distortion and not too bad for vignetting. This lens does not really cope well with having bright lights in the picture. We see lots of flaring and a bit of a lack of contrast. That's quite typical for a lens of this type, but still we might have hoped for slightly better in one of Canon's L series lenses. Some great news is that this lens has very nice quality bokeh. Those out of focus backgrounds, and you can really get them with this lens at f2.8, look very smooth and buttery. This is a fantastic lens for getting background separation. Overall, the Canon 100mm f2.8 Macro IS USM L is a wonderful performer in almost every way. It has very solid and professional build quality, and its optics are very sharp indeed, not to mention free of distortion, and the quality of its bokeh really is excellent. Macro photography can be really fun, but the 100mm focal length of this lens makes it quite versatile for all kinds of other photography, and the image stabilisation makes it also rather useful for video work. We can happily say that this lens is a wonderful piece of equipment, which comes very highly recommended.